Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close Up. Only on KCCI, Governor Reynolds lays out her priorities for her final full legislative session leading Iowa.
The legislators have heard loud and clear from property tax owners that it's time that we do something.
The governor's proposal on how to make it work and the sacrifices it could take to get there.
I'm proud of it. I feel like I'm leaving a little bit better than I found it.
And celebrating successes and looking ahead to what she wants to accomplish before she finishes out her final term.
You're watching KCCI 8 News Close Up.
Good morning. I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Brooker. Iowa lawmakers are back at the State House for the 2026 legislative session. And for Governor Kim Reynolds, this is her final opportunity to turn her agenda into law, from cutting property taxes to changing public safety policy. In a wide-ranging one-on-one interview, I asked the governor to walk through what she's proposing and how it would affect you, from your tax bill to the roads you drive on, and how much change she thinks she can get done in her final full year as governor. Governor, thank you so much for making the time to chat. We really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for asking.
Well, I want to start with property taxes. It's the big focus of this session, and there's been a lot of conversation about how do lawmakers balance giving homeowners immediate relief while also being careful about changing a complicated and an old system. So I want to talk about your proposal and how you strike that balance. For homeowners that are watching and wondering about your proposal, what type of relief would they see on their property tax bill immediately, next year, if your plan passes?
So in the first year, most of the bill doesn't take effect until fiscal year 28. So we're a year out, not this legislative session. And we just need to give local governments time to implement some of the things that we're trying to do. Plus, they're already in the budgeting cycle. So just from that perspective, depending on when we would get it passed, it would be really tough to implement it. One of the provisions of the bill, which accelerates the SAVE funding, that a certain percentage goes to property tax, we are able to start that in this next fiscal year. And that would be about $58 million that they would see immediately. So that would be year one. And then it just continues to grow from there. The models that we've ran projects a little over $3 billion in savings over the 6 years. So, and that's phased in over the 6 years. So they'll start to see some significant property tax reductions in year two. I think we bump over to about 178 million. I could be off a little bit on that, but I think it's over 150 million for sure. And then we go into the 350, but over 6 years, it's a little over $3 billion that they'll see reflected in their, it should see reflected in their property tax bills.
And then when you're looking at long term, those 6 years, but then beyond that, is your goal really to overhaul how Iowa's property tax system works?
Well, first of all, I think it's the expectation of Iowans, to be quite honest, that we get something done this year. I think I said in the condition of the state, on average, it's increased 10% in 2 years, and especially for our seniors. They're living on fixed incomes, and they've done everything right. They've saved, they've bought their home, they've paid off their mortgage a lot of times. Sometimes they haven't. And because of the constant, the rise in property taxes that they've seen, I mean, it's driving them out of their homes, and that's not right. And so, but it's hard. You started the interview with that comment, or it would have been done. We've tackled every other piece of tax reform, and this is the one that's left. And so I think the good news for property taxpayers across the state is the House has a bill, the Senate has a bill, and I have a bill. Senate's has dropped, mine has dropped. I believe the House bill will drop next week. And the fact that we have that done in the first 2 weeks of the legislative cycle, I think really is a testament that the legislators have heard loud and clear from property tax owners that it's time that we do something about the increasing cost of property taxes. So there's a great willingness there to get it done. How we've done it in the past, when you've got different bills like that's been very similar to the tax cuts that we've passed 6 and 7 years. We start with my bill, their bill, House bill, Senate. We find where there's some commonality, start to pull this over into another column, and then we start having conversations or additions with what's left on the sheet, and start seeing how many of the things we can move over to the final column, take it to the floor, House and Senate, and hopefully get it to my desk for signature so we can move forward on property tax reform.
Yeah. A lot that we'll continue
Yeah.
watching, because we may see a different plan, by the end of session.
Well, and it will. And that's why I don't weigh in on bills early on, because you'll see a lot of movement on this as they go home and attend their forums and things.
Yeah, well, regardless what passes, but I do want to focus on your plan, but I think we would see this really in any plan, that cities and counties are going to collect less.
Yep.
And you mentioned that in your condition of the state speech, that you want local governments to rein in spending.
Yep.
What type of spending do you think cities and counties should be focused on cutting, and how do you see that impacting services?
They've been elected. They're right individuals, just like we've done at the state. They do it just opposite the way we do it at the state. So I have REC that sets the budget, the dollar amount that we have to spend on the general fund budget. And then we have to build our priorities within those limits. At the local level, what they do is they set their budget first, so whatever they want, and then they backfill with levies because they can increase the asking from the property taxpayers. And that's just not the way that it should be done. It should be just the opposite. And when it is just the opposite like that, when you have a set amount of dollars, revenue that you have to operate with, then you have to prioritize what's important. How can I do things differently that would, save dollars that I could put into essential services, so that I would assume would be the priorities. And so how do we fund those first, and what are the ways that we can reduce the cost of providing those services? How can we do it differently? There's great examples all across the state. I mentioned just a couple of them in the condition of the state. So there's opportunities to do that. You just have to, you have to think differently. Iowans have to be willing to be open to having their services delivered differently, and we can get there. So mine, it's a 2% cap, so they are getting, growth. It's based already on an elevated floor, so property taxes have gone like that over the last 10 years, so we're starting from an elevated position already, 2% plus new growth. So they are getting new growth. And again, remember our seniors that are living on fixed incomes, they're not seeing that. There's a lot of opportunity to change the way that we deliver services, and I look forward to seeing some of the ideas that they come up with. The other thing that we're doing to encourage that is we stood up an incentive fund, and my bill has $10 million in it, and so as they're working with other local governments, other counties, a city and surrounding suburbs to take on technology, or for an example, then that would allow them to apply for a grant for that transition phase to help with some of those costs to implement cost savings down the road.
When you talked to cities and counties, because you traveled the state and talked to different stakeholders, what feedback did you get from local governments that you can point to in your plan and say this is what came out of those roundtable meetings?
Scott County was the one that I talked about in the condition of the state. They gave me an example of what they've done, moving how they the county provides service for the surrounding communities. They save about $18 million a year by doing that. That's a great example. Sharing law enforcement, great example. I didn't realize to the extent there's several counties that are really contracting with their local with their local hospitals to provide public health services. I think that is a great example. Boone was looking at partnering with Story and maybe Green for EMS services. I thought that was a great example. So there are so many out there, and they're already doing there's a lot of memo of understanding, so a lot of shared services already taking place. I think we just need to talk about that more and look for other opportunities to do that. But we can't keep doing the same thing. There just is very little levers that we can pull that can start to rein in property taxes, and putting a spending cap on is the one way that we can really, I think, it will drive local governments to think differently, just like we've done at the state. And it works. I mean, it works, and we're continuing to do it. We're working with Amazon Web Services, where we'll consolidate 50 call centers into one, and it's actually will be faster, quicker, better service for those that are utilizing them. And I'm doing the same thing with Google Public Works for the child welfare system. It is so antiquated, and in a year I'll have that thing stood up, and it will be a fraction of the cost of what we typically pay for platforms like that. I mean, today it takes 4 to 5 years to get something like that done, and that's not the age we live in. We got to get out of that mode, and we got to figure out how we can take advantage of this technology and these partners that can streamline how we're providing services and dramatically reduce the cost.
Iowa looks pretty different when you go from community to community. So how do you see your plan playing out differently when you look at rural communities who may have a smaller tax base, some older Iowans living in their communities versus newer communities that may have, a larger tax base but more people and so more services to provide?
Yeah, I mean, so that's where they need to look to their neighbors and see how can we share services, how can we be better at what we're doing. Right now, it's a lot of the larger communities that are doing some really innovative things, and we need to just adapt that same mindset and take it out into the state. And honestly, they ask at the roundtables, what are some of these other counties doing? So it's not like they're afraid to do it or don't want to do it. It's just sometimes understanding what are some of the innovative things that some of my colleagues are doing, so that we can take a look at it and adapt it for maybe rural Iowa versus a more larger city. But really the same concept applies no matter where you're at. You just have to find the partners. I mean, it's like taking 42 disparate mental health and substance abuse systems and building it into 7 behavioral health regions. All of that extra money gets to go into the system and into services. It's that same concept, but those savings can help us bring down property taxes. And so it's trying to give flexibility to the counties, but having them kind of shift the way they're putting budgets together so they can live within their means. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling, because right now a lot of times what we hear, it is harder for rural Iowa. That's where I come from. We don't have a lot of times the property tax base, but as we're seeing property taxes escalating, people are leaving rural Iowa because they can't afford to stay. So that's part of the equation too, and we need to hopefully grow the population in rural Iowa. We're doing childcare, we're doing housing, we're doing broadband. If we can get property taxes in line, and with the overall tax work that we put in place, it helps our businesses expand and grow in every single corner of the state. So it's all part of the package to get the changes that we hopefully will drive growth in not only population, but in the economy as well.
Our conversation with the governor continues after the break with a look at her plans for the state budget. Stay with us. Under your projections, when will Iowa stop using one-time funding to balance the budget?
Well, I don't think I would really say it like that. So what we're doing is we're using the Taxpayer Relief Fund. It was always designed for that. I don't do just a one-year budget. I do a one-year budget and a 5-year projection. And in that projection, as we bring taxes down, I think hopefully you saw the post. We cut taxes more than any other state in the country. We were not competitive. We were holding on to, we believe taxpayers can better decide how to use those funds than the government. And that's why we are streamlining and realigning and being better at what we do. And so we stood up the Taxpayer Relief Fund to spread out the cost of bringing taxes down until we can start to see the economy rebound. And we will. And so that's what it's there for. And hopefully at some point, we'll draw that down, but we'll see enough growth in the economy that will be on our way. I hope we're not done cutting taxes. I think I'm proud that we're at 3.8, because when I started as governor in this state, it was 9%. I mean, that's ridiculous. We were so uncompetitive. But we can go lower, and I think, there's some really good ideas that we're looking at. I probably won't be a part of that because just timing, there's not enough time. But there's a real opportunity for this state to continue to bring down the individual income tax rate in the 2s at some point, I would hope, low 3s, and then just continue to be competitive. And it is like waving a flag that we're open for business. It makes sense to locate and expand here. We're continuing to look at the tax environment and also the regulatory environment. I mean, over 4,000 regulations in 18 months is amazing. And so that's what that was designed for. That's what we're going to use it for. We've made the case every year when they wanted to spend it down. Now, if you took that funding and you put it into school or something like that, then it would be using that for a one-time expense for ongoing expenses. That's what some of the schools did with the COVID dollars. They took those dollars that were one-time dollars and they hired additional teachers, and then they've not been able to sustain that funding going forward. And so that is not what we're doing with this. It is money that we always intended to use for tax cuts to spread out the timeline until we can see the economy grow.
But in that taxpayer relief fund, right, there's $4 billion in that fund. Obviously, there's also the budget surplus, but we're talking specifically about the taxpayer relief fund. Until the economy rebounds, there's money from that that's going in to cover the state revenue that's dropped from the income taxes. At the end of 5 years, will there still be money left in that taxpayer
We draw
relief
it down.
fund?
You'll see as it's starting to go down. I mean, even projections 2 years ago when we started this, when we dropped it to the 3.8 or phased it in, or where we started in 2018 with the first one, we would run the projections. And they're projections, so you can't tell, but we had projected that we would start dipping into them. We did it in 18, 19, 20, 21, and we didn't because the economy was still growing, and so we had enough growth that we were able to sustain the phase down of the taxes. It was manageable. Well, when we went to 3.8 and we accelerated it a year, that took a little bit bigger dip, but we are seeing our economy rebound. We saw $20 billion of new capital investment in the state since 2024. So we are starting to grow. I think hopefully ag will rebound with we're starting to see China has agreed to purchase some soybeans. We're looking at new markets, some of the tariff money that's coming in. We've seen the president put in place the market facilitation to help our farmers who have been impacted by 4 years of no talk at all or nothing to do with trade from the Biden administration. So that money will be infused into the economy. So I think the One Big Beautiful Bill, it was retroactive. So people are going to see that in this year, and that's going to get infused to the economy. So hopefully we're going to see things start to change. We'll monitor it, but we do have that fund there to make sure that we can manage what we put in place, and we will be able to. And if not, then you have to make other decisions.
The concern that we hear from people is they get that, but they also want to make sure that the taxpayer relief fund won't run out if the economy doesn't rebound, or if there is a change. So is there a year based on your projections that show the economy will rebound by this year and we won't need to use the taxpayer relief fund?
No, they're projections, so we dip into a little bit. It depends on the amount each year, but there's so many variables that go into that. And it's just like that is to help spread it out, and it's there and we utilize it and we're okay. But if it comes to a point where we're not, then you make different budgetary choices. There's different levers, triggers that you can pull, but we feel confident that we'll be okay, that fund will cover the tax cuts, and that we're going to see we're going to see the economy turn around. We're going to see the economy grow. We're already seeing that. We've created an environment where this is where business wants to locate. We've seen that, and so it's a projection, but right now we're fine.
When we come back, we address the path forward on the hot button topic of eminent domain, where the governor stands after the issue went unresolved last year. Talking about eminent domain,
Yep.
lawmakers are back working
Yep.
on that. It went unresolved
Yep.
last year. What key principles do you want lawmakers to be thinking about as they move forward?
Well, you know, this is what's happening right now. We have a bill in the House. It's moving. The Senate will have a bill. All of us are communicating, and so we're having conversations on how we can hopefully find some resolution and move forward. So I'm not going to get in the middle of that and talk about key pieces that I need. Those conversations are taking place, and that's how we'll hopefully get to resolution moving forward. So as long as everybody continues to communicate and in good faith try to find a solution that we believe is workable, then I think that's the direction that we need to be moving, and I'm seeing that happen right now. So I think that's good.
Are there things that would raise red flags for you?
No, I'm not going to lay any markers out right now. That's my position. I want the communication to stay open. I want both. I haven't seen, I haven't had a chance to look at the Senate bill. I want to take a look at that and just see what those look like moving forward. And the House, we have that because they've already had a subcommittee. But right now, I want to kind of let the process play out. They're communicating, we're communicating, and let's just see where we can go from there. But at this point, I don't think I want to lay out any markers publicly anyway. But I think, we'll find some resolution.
On public safety, that's something that you have made a priority this year. You have a plan that would, for undocumented immigrants, if they commit something or they're charged with something that is more serious than a simple misdemeanor, they would face stricter bail rules.
Right.
How did you decide that this policy should apply specifically to undocumented immigrants?
Well, because they're here illegally to start with. So they've already broken the law. They're here illegally. They're a higher flight risk because of that. And so it made sense that we should, first of all, say that they don't qualify for bail, but it's not a mandate. They still can. If they can prove that they would qualify, then they can receive it. But, I feel very comfortable in moving forward with that.
This is your final full legislative session as governor, setting out policy priorities. What do you want Iowans at home to understand about what you're focused on during your final year?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's been just an incredible honor to serve as the governor of the state. I've loved almost every minute of it. COVID was a challenge, but I've really loved, and I love what we've been able to get done. So I feel really good about the things that we've accomplished under my tenure, really working with the legislature. I don't do it by myself. I think we've done a good job of working together to really change the dynamics of the state, and I'm proud of it. I feel like I'm leaving a little bit better than I found it, and that's the goal, I think, of any governor. So I really, property tax is the one thing that's left. We've really reformed about every other aspect of taxes, so I'm hoping we can get that done. I'm extremely proud of what we've been able to do with education. It's unconscionable the kids, just leaving them behind with the literacy, the kids that aren't proficient in literacy and science and math, and I feel like we've made a lot of changes that were really, and we're seeing it happen. I'm very excited about this. Cancer. So we are going to be able to do things that we would have never been able to do without this health transformation grant program that the Trump administration has made eligible to states all across the country. And I truly believe we're going to be able to turn our cancer narrative around, and we'll be able to implement a lot this year. We'll be able to allocate that $50 million. We already have 250 some proposals in. We'll be awarding contracts by the end of this month, really standing up all the things I talked about, screening, prevention, treatment.
Well, Governor, thank you so much for making time to chat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here next Sunday. Have a great day.